Hawaiʻi. O Michael Meli koʻu inoa, no kaimuki oʻahu mai au, noho au ma kaimuki oʻahu, kahi kaulana ka hale ai, ia Rainbow Drive-In. Welcome everybody, my name is Michael Meli, I'm from Kaimuki Oahu. For those of you who are not familiar with our island here on Oahu, here in Hawaii, Kaimuki is right next to Waikiki. We live on the back slopes of Diamond Head. And so Kaimuki for me is famously known for Rainbow Drive-In, the best plate lunch place in the world ever since I was a little kid. Well, I will be your facilitator for this session. We are joined by Leanne Patch-Highfield, who hails from our beautiful Mokuo Keawe. And so Leanne will be our moderator and will be monitoring the chat for any questions that you might have during this session. Mahalo for joining us. It is a new space. As we navigate this virtual space, we kindly ask that that you give us your grace and your understanding should there be any technical issues. But I'm confident that we ironed out any of the issues or prospective challenges that might have arisen. We will be muting everyone's mics during the presentation to avoid any background noise or any feedback. So please use the meeting chat to ask questions or leave comments, and our presenters will do their best to respond to them following the presentation. We ask that you please do not share your screen or stop the recording. And if you do happen to be logged off, just click back into the Microsoft Teams meeting link again to rejoin us. I would like to welcome from the Office of Hawaiian Education our wonderful presenters, Kuʻulei Makua, Kalena Nakasone, Dana Tanigawa, Keola Kaʻuhane, who will be presenting on Āina Aloha, Rooting Curriculum to Hawaii. Mahalo.
Aloha kakahiaka no kako pakahi apau. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. We're very excited to share with you all this morning Āina Aloha, Rooting Curriculum to Hawaii. As Michael said, we are from the Office of Hawaiian Education, which is an office within our Department of Education. And we would like to start this morning by sharing this oli he mele no ka'ohe kulani, which was written and composed in 2015, shortly after our office was established as an office within the Department of Education by Limahana of Ohe, as we call ourselves as an acronym, Kalehua Krug, Kalai Akioka, and Malia Melemai. And this oli really represents who we are as the Office of Hawaiian Education and our shared work and our shared purpose. And so if we will start with our oli he mele no ka'ohe kulani.
O ki kilo ke ali no I ho lani o hulia. Au hea oi ka o he kulani ke kama'a kumu kahila ua o le huai. Ua lau I ka holoa aloa I paia a paana aloa. Ulua hua hu ka puna ka eua eo ke eo ka lani ai. Aloha e, aloha e, aloha noa.
He mele no ka'ohe kulani reminds us that as we see change upon us and stay focused on the potential of the future, we are encouraged to return to the balance of our foundations, that which is ingrained in this unique place we call home, that which is Hawaii. Seeding of opportunities, witnessing growth, sharing in accomplishments as a community, by setting sacred space and ensuring that the right conditions are in place and are nurtured, only then will we truly be able to empower communities to become stewards of abundance, thriving, and a sustained Hawaii.
And so we welcome you with our oli he mele aloha no ka'ohe kulani. We'd like to also start today by looking at our po Mahina. As we look at this practice of Aloha Aina and this relationship through Aina Aloha, we share po Mahina as an example of a way that we can make connecting to Aina a daily practice. This morning, po Mahina is muku. We've had an exceptionally long muku during this phase. She rose this morning at 7:59 and she was set at 7:39 as Hilo, which is the start of the new year. And we made the correlation this morning as a team to Chinese New Year as well as we celebrate Chinese New Year this year. Muku literally implies that the malama has ended and therefore she is dark. But just because we can't see her, it doesn't mean that she isn't there. She's just hidden in the shadow. We've been practicing Po Mahina as a team, and one of the resources that we look to is Tom Penna of Kealapono. And he reminds us that when Mahina goes muku, she is in essence reached the moment of emptiness. When Maoli is the very last release of breath, muku is disappearing into nothingness, which also can be associated with ha'a ha'a. Of all of the countless ways, Tom says, that seeing what Mahina is doing, her malama cycle, which is essentially a cycle of illumination, is very much like breathing. In this context, Mahina exhaled completely from Maoli to Muku and will begin receiving illumination when she sets as Hilo. And so we welcome everyone as we kind of finish out Muku and we look forward to Hilo, which is a time of transition and new beginnings. So aloha nui kako. As Michael said, we are from the Office of Hawaiian Education, and I'm here with my colleagues, Dana, Keola, and Karen. And our why within the office, as we've experienced through our oli, is really about kukulu ia a kalele ia ho'i keala e ho'olu ai ke aloha ʻāina me ʻōnaʻike I ko Hawaiʻi It's grounding education in Hawaiian ways of knowing so that all of Hawaii may thrive, regardless of our ethnicity, regardless of our cultural beliefs, regardless of our religion. The thing that connects us as residents of these islands is Hawaii. And so when we do for Hawaii, we do for all. Really briefly, our agenda that we will go through as we have just a little less than an hour with you all is we started with our vehena, we had our oli, ko'ohe kulani, as well as our introductions. We talked a little bit about po mahina, and we're going to move into a ho'olauna activity. After our ho'olauna, because we want to honor who we see here in this virtual space today, we'll move into the mo'olelo, sharing the genealogy and the origins of Aina Aloha, the competencies as they've been developed. We'll share a couple of examples, and then we'll move into our closing of sharing resources and providing a little bit of a mahalo circle for us as we close out our space and our time together. So as we move forward with our agenda today, I'm going to toss it over to Keola, who's going to take us through our ho'olauna.
Aloha mai kako. Thank you all for joining us. We would like to take this opportunity to kind of get to know you a little bit, and also happy ʻōlelo Hawaii month. We're going to take a little bit of time to allow everyone to introduce themselves virtually. Now, if we are in a smaller setting, we'd be able to personalize it more, but in this large gathering, we would still like to see who is participating, where you are from, and what are some of your mana'o. We'd like for each of you to share a little of your mo'olelo. If you go to menti.com on your computer or another device, such as a cell phone or a tablet, if you can enter menti.com and then enter the code 7845677. You'll also be able to find this code in the chat. Now, once you are in Menti, you'll see the prompt at the top asking for your name, organization, and role. Aina, and Aina could be the place that you were born or from, or where you live now, or a special place that is dear to you. And then finally, the question, how does connection to place impact teaching and learning? So for example, my name is Keola Kaʻuhane. I am from the Office of Hawaiian Education, Hawaiian Studies Program as a resource teacher. My ʻāina is pālama, and I think that sharing of moʻolelo of a place can open learners' minds and hearts to want to know more. So that's an example for you. As you enter your response on the Menti, you'll see it populate the screen. Now, if anyone cannot get into Menti, please share your response in the chat so we can get to know you a little bit. Okay, so if everybody can go to menti.com, enter the code 7845677, and let's see your responses populate. All right, I see a Brittany from Palolo, Terry from Kilohana Elementary on Molokai, Kelena from Tutu and me. We got a Jason from Kamehameha Schools, Big Island. We also have a student teacher, Maile, Wendy Marks from the Marine Mammal Center. Yes, exactly what you guys see others are doing. Please also respond. Don't forget the last part, the how does the connection to place impact teaching and learning. Let's take a look, see who else is joining us, participating in this presentation. Now, even if we move forward on our presentation, we will leave the Menti open. So if you were having difficulty getting on, or if it's just taking a little bit longer, please feel free to continue to enter your responses, for our Aloha Circle, just so we can see who's with us today. Mahalo for those of you that also shared in the chat. We can see all of your responses coming up. We got people from all over the place in all different capacities from various organizations.
Okay, thank you everyone for sharing your ho'olauna. We're gonna now move and ask Karen to move us into the mo'olelo of Āina Aloha.
Yeah, mahalo ya oko pakahi for bringing your energy and your mana into this space by putting your information in the Menti and the chat. So vilin mai kako apau. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the background of Āina Aloha. Āina Aloha can be translated to mean beloved place and place of aloha, as this newspaper article from 1895 explains. It is our shared deep love for Hawaii's communities and natural environments and our reciprocal relationship to Aina. The intention behind this framework is to create a system that validates and honors Kūpuna and ancestors and the way they felt and interacted with Aina in that reciprocal relationship. It's a reminder that a'o and traditional models of education is an exchange just like ha. So we'll be looking at events that have led to what we see and experience in our current system and how Āina Aloha provides a way to reconnect education to Hawaii's roots. We look back to traditional models of a'o or teaching and learning to see what we can learn from our Kūpuna. As Dr. Kahakalau shared this morning, in Ahupua'a systems, teaching and learning was embedded in one's nohona. Education was family and community-based and deeply rooted in Aina language and culture. Learning was meaningful and purposeful in order to sustain and provide for the physical, spiritual, and emotional well-being of our communities. There was no separation between what we lived and what we learned. Our kupuna were Aina literate. They could read our environment and interacted with environment in pono, sustainable ways. Auhipau ka'ike kahalau ho'okahi. Learning was not confined to one source of knowledge or one place of learning. Our kupuna had intimate, personal, deep connections and relationships with Aina. They understood the systems, cycles, rhythms, patterns, movements, breathing of our Aina. As we move towards the 1920s, we see the arrival of missionaries and the introduction of print or written language. Our kupuna were able to transfer their Aina literacy skills to print. By 1834, Kanaka in the Hawaiian Kingdom achieved a print literacy rate of over 90% in less than 20 years. In 1840, Kamo'i Kauikeauli established our public education system, and we find ourselves today reconnecting to education that is family and community-based and rooted in Aina language and culture. Next. So if you look at the timeline, you'll see that from 1840 and the establishment of our public education system, there were several events in our history that have caused the intentional disconnect of Hawaiian language and culture in some of our education system. We see the overthrow of our Hawaiian kingdom, the banning and punishment of our Kūpuna for speaking ʻōlelo Hawaii in schools, and the illegal annexation of Hawaii. Teaching and learning shifts from being part of our nohona and is no longer connected to our language and our culture. We see a shift in learning environments from learning from and on our Aina and in our communities to schoolhouses and within classrooms. With the Hawaiian Renaissance of the 1970s, we experienced a resurgence of our language and culture and a sense of pride and advocacy that leads to the establishment of programs such as Hawaiian Studies and Kaiapuni in our public education system. I'm going to hand it over to Kuʻulei, who will share how Āina Aloha and Ha are connected. Kuʻulei.
Thank you, Karen. So as Karen shared, in traditional models of ʻAʻo, teaching and learning was contextualized, and there was a relationship between content and context. Alongside with Āina Aloha, the competencies, which I've dropped an e-copy of in the chat so you all can follow along as we share about Āina Aloha. Āina Aloha is a tool that supports educators in grounding their curricular content to Hawaii and ʻIke Hawaii. The DOE also has the framework Nahopena A'o, or Ha, which is about context, or the creation of learning environments that lead to a strengthened sense of breadth for all of our DOE stakeholders. These two work together to support implementation of Hawaiian culture-based education in our DOE. It is our belief that in designing for a Hawaii-based system, content and context must be rooted to Hawaii. As such, Āina Aloha and Ha perpetuate the following methodology and epistemology. ʻAʻo, teaching and learning happens all day long, all around us. And what we live is what we learned. Given that, our neighborhoods, our communities, our homes, and our outdoor learning spaces in schools are living classrooms. When we contextualize teaching and learning in multiple learning spaces, beyond the four walls of our classrooms and of our schools, we reconnect and reacquaint ourselves to the Aina, our Kūpuna, that which feeds and sustains us physically, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. Kumu has many meanings, including base, foundation, origin, teacher, tree, or sources of knowledge, to name just a few. When we broaden our perspective through this lens, we recognize the importance to use multiple kumu in our design for ʻAʻo. In this way, ohana and caregivers are honored as first teachers, Aina is recognized as kupuna and kumu, and there is a shared purpose that allows us to see each other's gifts and contributions to ʻAʻo. Hawaiian culture-based education requires that we plan for teaching and learning in multiple learning spaces and from various learning sources. We're going to dig a little bit deeper now into what are Āina Aloha, its competencies, and I'm going to hand the mic back over to Karen, who's going to take us through the next couple of slides.
Mahalo e Kuʻulei. So in the design of Āina Aloha, we convened community members, both internal and external to the DOE, private and public sector, to collaboratively design what would eventually become Āina Aloha. It was consistently communicated and validated that teachers have content standards, and we did not want to add one more thing to teachers' plates. But at the same time, we also wanted to remain cognizant of Board Policy 1057, which calls for an appreciation of and proficiency in Hawaiian culture, language, and history. So to that end, Āina Aloha was developed in order to provide educators with a tool that strengthens pilina to Aina and roots content in Hawaii to strengthen one's identity, sense of BREATH, one's kuleana to their environment, physical, human, and spiritual. Āina Aloha has a metaphor of roots. Āina Aloha helps us recognize that our identities are grounded and shaped by the places that raise us, and by rooting our content to Hawaii and contextualizing learning to Hawaii, we strengthen our Ha and our ability to be stewards of our island home. Roots and veins serve the function of carrying nutrients and oxygen throughout the system it serves. And in the same way, A'a serves to revitalize and reconnect all educators to our Aina. Roots also support and communicate with each other through mycorrhiza, which is akua. Within the context of Aina Aloha, akua refers to natural phenomena and forces of nature and does not refer to deities or God. It also reminds us of our connectivity, that we sit in generations, so we mahalo our kupuna and remember our kuleana to leave a positive legacy for generations to come. As mentioned earlier, Aina Aloha was developed around competencies that educators could seamlessly incorporate into their content standards. Through ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi, kuanaʻike, and honua, they could root or contextualize their content to Hawaii. Within the competencies of kuanaʻike and honua, there are kumuhana of ahupua'a, moʻolelo, mahalo and ho'ihi, pono, and kuleana. And we'll dive a little deeper into each of these competencies in a bit. So each of these kumuhana are designed around a learning cycle that reminds us that learning is cyclical and spiraling, not linear and terminal. So much like the growth of a kukui tree, there is no beginning or end. Hua become kupu, which turn into liko, then pua, and back to hua, and the cycle repeats itself. We all, as educators and students, enter this learning cycle at different places based on our ohana, our experiences, and our perspectives. This culturally responsive epistemology is honored through this learning cycle that we borrow from the work of Dr. Keiki Kauai'aia and her work with Moinaha. We're going to dive a little deeper now into how Aina Aloha allows us to think about designing for learning. So I'm going to hand it back over to Kuʻulei.
Mahalo, Karen. Aina Aloha, much like culture-based education, reminds us of the importance of looking to our past to inform our future. This is very much what Dr. Kukahakalau talks about this morning when she talked about both traditional and contemporary rigor, right? If what we live is what we learn, then let's ho'i to the ways of designing for learning as it's embedded in our daily lives. As it was said, Aina Aloha or A'a is a tool that is intended to help educators do that. There are 3 competencies within Aina Aloha. I've dropped an e-copy of Aina Aloha in the chat for those of you that would like to see the document, the palapala itself, and follow along. And you can refer to pages 4 or 5 when we talk about this first competency of ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi. ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi is the mother language of our island home, and it is the key to connecting to Hawaiian culture. Through the use of ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi, we gain a cultural lens that is rooted in the values of our Aina, helping to shape our kuanaʻike, how we view, live, and engage with the world. ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi is embedded throughout all of Aina Aloha, and the extent of its usage is dependent upon both teacher and student readiness. All kupu stages of the learning cycle across all competencies will be about teachers and students being able to understand the importance of and significance of that competency from their own experiences. In the case of ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi, kupu allows for the learner, child or adult, to reflect on their personal relationship with ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi and understanding its significance and importance. As we go through these competencies, we invite you to think about the ways that you are currently using ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi, kuanaʻike, and honua in your practice, either personally or professionally. We are proud to be able to offer a couple of examples of the way that we see ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi thriving and growing and strengthening both within our DOE system, but also more normalized in our communities. As Keola shared, as Dr. Kukahakalau shared, we are in Pepeluwali, Mahina, ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi, and we see a much normalized sense of ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi. Lately, I've been seeing on the news with Kamakapili, and even on the radio, a lot more ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi being used, whether it's to refer to the days of the week, look at our po Mahina in our nightly newscasts, and that kind of encouragement really makes us see how much further we've grown. And I think Antiku actually even did a poll, right? She started in ʻōlelo Hawaii and she asked, how are we? Are we doing awesome in understanding? Are we doing okay? And she mentioned 10 years ago, right? Many of us may have been at that dot of, I don't know what's going on. And so we see a big movement, right? So that should be something that we celebrate, an accomplishment as a community. Within our DOE system, we also have a parent at Kilauea School who has wrote an oli for that school. And they use that oli as a part of their opening and closing of the weeks for them as a school community. At Kalihiwaina Elementary, we have an example of a teacher who uses ʻōlelo Hawaii, our good friend Kuʻulei Tengan, shout out to Kuʻulei, who does a weekly recording of ʻōlelo Hawaii Word of the Week. At Kalaheo High School, we see an example of students who use a Hawaiian Word of the Week. And we have a video, but that's okay. We're having some challenges with our technology this morning. But they also use the ʻōlelo Hawaii word in context. And so, you know, if the word of the week is noho ilalo, then they'll do a skit and they'll have a student that says, excuse me, you know, Keola, can you noho ilalo? I can't see the whiteboard. And so they give students an opportunity to see the contextualized use of ʻōlelo Hawaii. Oh, here, look, we got it. Here's the video. Let's look at our keiki from Kalaheo Elementary.
My phrase is noho ilalo. Noho ilalo means to sit down. Can you say noho ilalo? Noho ilalo! Now let's see noho ilalo in action. 5 equals 0. Excuse me, Jacob and Sandra, can you guys please noho ilalo? Because I can't see the teacher or the board. That was great language. All right.
And that's just one example and one way in which teachers and students alike in our system are making efforts to normalize ʻōlelo Hawaii as a part of the work that they do as a large school community or even in their individual classrooms. We also see a more closeness to ʻōlelo Hawaii as people really look at, you know, what are the names of their schools, Kapalama Elementary, and digging deeper into what is this sacred place? Why is our school named Kapalama? Where we sit in our office, Maluko, we sit right across from Central Intermediate, and we've recently celebrated both Kamehameha and Keʻalikolani's birthdays. And Central Intermediate is, you know, now occupying the space that was Keʻalikolani's home, Halekeaua. And there's a call now to honor Keʻalikolani and to maybe talk and enter a conversation around what might it mean to have the name of the school be more connected to Keʻalikolani. And so we're so excited for these celebrations of ʻōlelo Hawaii within our DOE system and in our larger communities. The second competency within Āina Aloha is Kuana'ike. Kuana'ike is about worldview and understanding the relationship between Akua, natural phenomena, Aina, and Kanaka, and the importance of their connectivity. There are 3 kumuhana topics within Kuana'ike. Ahupua'a is used as a metaphor for systems and cycles. Through understanding systems and cycles, we're better able to understand the relationship between Akua, Aina, and Kanaka in order to be pu'ono stewards of our island home. Mo'olelo is about history, genealogy, and stories of our places. Knowing the mo'olelo of our Aina, including traditional place names, landmarks, land usage, and how they've changed over time, deepens our pilina with these places, facilitating both an advocacy and stewardship of Aina. And in Mahalo and Ho'ihi, we reflect on our role as Kanaka and our kuleana to be in service to the total well-being of the communities to which we belong, both people and places. When our identity, disposition, and behaviors are grounded in gratitude and ho'ihi, we deepen our personal connections with Aina and others and strengthen our sense of belonging and kuleana to these communities. Honua is about a sense of place and understanding that he ali'i ka Aina he kaua ke kanaka. The land is our chief and we are its servants. The Aina does not need us, but we as Kanaka need the Aina. The first kumuhana topic within Honua is pono. And pono is about understanding the balance between akua, ʻāina, and kanaka, and understanding the importance of their interconnectedness to contribute to the well-being of ʻāina as stewards. It's being connected and having a knowledge so deep, so wide, so intimate with ʻāina, akua, and kanaka that they form a single identity. As you see in the Nahonua Mauliola description for pono, to say I am Hawaiian and I belong to this land is the same thing. Much like the mele we heard for this morning from Project Kuleana, I am Hawaii. Most of us know Kuleana to mean responsibility. It also means accountability and privilege. And when we use the lens of ʻōlelo Hawaii to look beyond the single definition of kuleana, we deepen our understanding and application of kuleana. We take pride in our obligation, our right, our honor to be stewards of our island home. This is the legacy we have inherited from our Kūpuna, and we will leave for our moʻopuna. Let's take a look at some of the examples of both honua and kuanaʻike. Each of these competencies are so interconnected that it's really difficult to say that this is an example of honua or this is an example of kuanaʻike because of their wovenness so tightly like a makaloa mat. Oftentimes we see kuanaʻike, honua, and ʻōlelo Hawaii in all of these examples. And so we just offer these as some examples, not an exhaustive list of examples of how we're celebrating these competencies within our DOE system. Many of our schools have partnered with artists to be able to make use of some of the outdoor spaces in their school campuses to work and create murals, like we see Mele Murals Project at Haleiwa Elementary, so that the walls are telling the stories of that place, so that when anyone walks by that wall, whether it's a student or a teacher or a family member or a community member, an administrator, a visitor, they're having conversations around why Haleiwa. What is Haleiwa? Oh, that's the Iwa bird, and they're engaging with these outdoor spaces in meaningful ways. We have a couple of examples here of schools that have formed relationships with community-based organizations in their places. Kohala Elementary has formed that relationship with ʻōlelo, and they take their students there in order to bring content, science, social studies, language arts, stories to life through their experiences at ʻōlelo. The ʻEleʻele school example that we see in the top right-hand corner is a partnership maybe about 3 years ago now with Kuana'ike. And that was really a partnership that was interesting because sometimes Kuana'ike, the staff came to the school and did lessons. Sometimes the haumana went over to their site in Waimea. But what they did is they developed this relationship. They brought in ohana to help them construct this hale that we see there. And it really gave them a shared purpose to create an outdoor learning space on their campus. Since this time, they've expanded it to include a garden, and the haumana are really excited, and the teachers, to use that space as an outdoor learning center for teaching and learning. Of course, in the middle, we see an example of Mahalo and Ho'ihi. Kalihiwaina Elementaries formed a relationship with Ho'oulu Aina, and they understand the importance of engaging in protocol when they go there. And then stewardship through the examples of Kailua Intermediate and Ka'ewai Elementary, both taking care of Hamakua Marsh, as well as a stream that is just neighboring Ka'ewai Elementary. And so we're so proud to celebrate the work of the DOE and, also encourage you all to continue to think about the ways in which you're doing Hawaiian culture-based education, integrating ʻōlelo Hawaii, honua, and kuanaʻike into the work that you all are doing. And so I'm going to hand it over to Keola because we've talked way too much and we want to hear a little bit from you guys now.
Mahalo, Kuʻulei. Now we've given a lot of information in a short period of time, and we would like to pause briefly to exhale and honor your stories, because as we're guessing, you're already doing this in your own way. So we are going to go back into menti.com to share the ways in which you use ʻōlelo Hawaii, kuanaʻike, or honua, personally or with others. You can put more than one response in, and as you do, we'll see everyone's responses. Let's all keep our fingers crossed that we can continue to see the screen. Menti.com. Now this time we're using a different code, 3906260. So it'll also appear in the chat as you see, and it is an open-ended response. So if you could go to menti.com, punch in that code, and again, in what ways do you engage with ʻōlelo Hawaii, kuanaʻike, or honua personally or with others? And let's take a look if we can see our screen populating with all of your beautiful responses. We got word of the day, mele, online ʻōlelo Hawaii courses, mele and moʻolelo. See some words within day-to-day conversation with your son, beautiful. Simple gestures and commands, everyday greetings, teaching my 2-year-old daughter, introductions, email, conversations, counting. Cousins, when school is on break, very nice. Not just in school, right? At home, when you see other Ohana members, mele and simple daily phrases. Start to bring ʻōlelo to after school programs and the staff learning as well as the youth. Yes, ʻōlelo classes with Keiki and their cousins when school is on break. Beautiful. Incorporate short phrases, greetings in email, phone conversation, face-to-face interactions. Consistently replacing English words with hua ʻōlelo Hawaii in conversations with my preschoolers. Yes, celebrate ʻōlelo Hawaii month. Learning a word each day at the farm. Incorporate in everything you do. Sometimes just hua ʻōlelo, sometimes ʻōlelo no e au. Ma o ke kakauana ina leka uila a pela vale aku ma ka ʻōlelo Hawaii. Mea e ma'a ai ka lehulehu i ka ʻōlelo. Va'a, hula, Pico using phrases throughout the day, on social media and journaling. Holauna with teaching team daily with keiki days of the week, calendar, moon phases, mele, greetings, simple directional phrases. Now please, if you did not get to enter, please, we will keep the Menti open for you to continue to enter on this Menti. With the idea of time in mind, we are going to forge forward. We did want to share a little bit with you before we close out, but please feel free to continue to share your mana'o. Mahalo. Now also we did want to point out our Aina Aloha choice board. So on the screen, as you can see in this bit.ly Hawaiian Education Hub. Now, when you go there, this will be our Office of Hawaiian Education Hub. And from that hub, you'd be able to go into the Hawaiian Studies Program. We do have a resource choice board in there. And in here, you'll find various resources, different organizations, etc., on addressing ʻōlelo Hawaii, Kuana'ike, and honua. Also, at the very bottom, as you look through all of our resources, now if you are an organization or individual that would like to share, to add on to our choice boards, at the very bottom of this, at the very bottom of the site, you'll have a chance to click on, as you can see, here we go. We got the Duolingo and Kani'aina in ʻōlelo Hawaii. We also have some under Kuana'ike and honua. Here at the bottom, this screen here, you are able, if you click on sharing uploading resources, if you are interested in adding on to our collection of resources, this would be the place to do it at. We welcome all of your input and your contribution. We will take a look at it and look at it further prior to adding it onto the choice boards. But this would be the place for everyone to share. Now, in closing, we would like to do a final panina And this is a one-word response on the Menti. The prompt we're going to give you is, what is resonating with you? Like, we've gave you a lot of information. What excites you about Āina Aloha? You'll be able to go on to the same code, 3906260. And what we're asking you to do this time is enter one word on what is resonating with you or what excites you about Aina Aloha. We do appreciate your time and attention. This will be our last activity before we close out. You will see your responses populate on our Menti board. And what you'll see there is, as the responses are coming in, if more people respond with the same response, that one will become larger and larger. Yeah, that's one word, Menti. So if you can get on either on your computer or another device, whether it's your cell phone or your tablet, enter the code 3906260. It's also in the chat there. And then responding with one word to what's resonating with you or what excites you about Aina Aloha. And it will take a look at how your responses populate our screen. All right, we see Kuleana, ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi, resources, fun, pilina, relevant, meaʻai, powerful. Kuleana is holding strong there, right in the middle, yeah? Pilina, revitalization, learning, future, pono, moʻolelo, maalama, perpetuation, compassion, sustainability, continuity. I see identity getting larger, Pilina getting even larger than that. Kuleana still holding strong. Ike Kūpuna is getting larger. Generations, resources, connection, culture, aloha. Oh, I see Lahui came big quickly. Love, ʻōlelo Hawaiʻi, culture, and pono. So, feel free to also take advantage of, if Menti is new to you, use these in your classroom or in your presentations as well. You could do one-word responses, as you see here, or open-ended responses. And they have other options as well. And if you did not get to enter, please feel free to enter on any of the Mentis that we offered today. We would like to also give you our contact information for the four of us that presented today. So we are all from the Office of Hawaiian Education. On behalf of myself and our leader, Kuʻulei Makua, Dana Tanigawa, and Kalena Nakasone, we appreciate your time and your patience through the technology. And we just wanted to say a big mahalo to everyone for your time today. This is a great conference. From here, you have a host of amazing speakers and presentations. Anything else, Kuʻulei, Kalena, Dana?
ʻAʻole, just mahalo.
Mahalo kako, thank you.
Mahalo nui loa iā ko e Kuʻulei, Kalena, Dana, a me Keola for sharing today. So many wonderful takeaways for today, from going over the muku to the hilo, our kuleana to the environment, to each other. So many takeaways that we can easily apply right away to our practice or wherever we are working. So I'd like to just take this time to mahalo you. And for those of you who are still here, if you could please turn on your cameras and join me in giving our presenters a virtual round of applause. Mahalo nui iā ko. Thank you so much for presenting to us today. Such valuable ike that you shared. And mahalo for the participants who came. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of your conference. Mahalo nui.